Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I am your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and it is time for another weekly IDP preview, which means I am once again #blessed to be joined by another great IDP mind, co-host of the IDP After Show, IDP writer at DLF and IDP Guys, a fellow Derwin James stan, all the way from the UK, the awesome Jace Abbey. Jace, what's up, man?
I'm all good, John. I'm all good. Great is a bit of a stretch, but hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah, I love coming on to your shows, John. We always have a blast, and you know what better way to spend a dark, miserable, rainy evening in England than to hop on with you and to talk some IDP.
Well, yeah, we could share in the misery because it is rainy over here in Canada as well. So I don't know what's going on different sides of the world, but we're just dealing with that type of weather. It's that time of the season, but happy to get you on, rain or shine. It is always a pleasure, my friend. I'm excited to talk some IDP with you. But yeah, this will be good. We got week 6 coming up. We've done these shows before. They tend to go about 2 hours or so, because we're going to go game by game again. And like I always say, we'll cover the main storylines and the matchups worth discussing for every team. And then as usual, I'll have the timestamps in there as well for each game in the episode description, so people can jump around and find the games that you're looking for. I'll also include a link to my IDP rankings over at pff.com and the link to the PFF IDP fantasy report as well, where you could find the IDP waiver targets, snap shares, utilization for every single IDP from this past week's game. And then for the YouTube crowd, all the visuals you see, the charts and stuff, they're all from the IDP fantasy report. So you could find that on the website. It's free to look at, and yeah, worth a like and subscribe on the YouTube as well, I would hope. But yeah, helps me a ton if you can do that. And then we are going to get into it here in just a second. But last piece of business before we do get into it, I do have a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is all about the back to school and back to routine checklist, and the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies to fit your family and your budget, with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy. meetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, let's kick things off, as we always do. Thursday night football, the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. Jace, should be, I don't know. It's always hard to say if Thursday night football is going to be good. It's usually not, but a division battle here. Obviously the Chiefs, being the Chiefs, but the Broncos, one of the worst defenses in the league. So where do you want to start off with this game?
Yeah, let's kick things off by talking about that Broncos linebacker situation. Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton. It's kind of interesting, I thought, to see Singleton lead Jewell in snap share in the first game, where both were fully healthy. They could be easing sort of Jewell back into play time after he injured that hip, kept him out of the Bears game. He was only involved in, I think, one full practice before the weekend. Singleton obviously has a slightly better tackle efficiency, but it's actually some way off what we were expecting from him this year and some way off what we saw from him last year, right? Mm-hmm. Neither guy has really helped fantasy managers with any big plays so far. So I don't think there's a lot to choose between them other than that snap share, which I think is why it's so important to keep an eye on that over the next few games. Looking at the chart that you published, we know the Chiefs give up the third most tackles to opposing linebackers this year. So we could see a big game from one or maybe both of these guys this week. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, excited about the matchup specifically for the Chiefs, but yeah, mostly trying to see if last week was just kind of an aberration as far as the snaps go, right? Because Jewel technically, I mean, would be the lead linebacker there. That's how they started the season. That's how they kind of project these guys. But like you said, coming off the injury, didn't have a full week of practice. So potentially, and knowing that they were on a short week as well, right? So I think there's at least a chance that Jewel retakes that 100% role and Alex Singleton kind of goes back down to the part-time role, which is still probably, yeah, going to be around 80% or so. But it just makes sense for Josey Jewell. I think he's the better player overall, even though he may not be necessarily the tackler that Alex Singleton is, like you said. But you look at the Broncos too, like they lead the league, their entire defense, with 73 missed tackles. Almost every single player on their defense who's played at least 40 snaps has at least one missed tackle. There's only three who have no missed tackles, and one is Randy Gregory, who is no longer on the team. The other is Patrick Surtain, who is arguably their best defensive player, and the other is Josey Jewell. So I would think that Josey Jewell probably gets a little bit more run because Alex Singleton has 8 missed tackles. He's second on the team behind only Damari Mathis with 11. So I do think Jewell's the better player. I think he makes more sense as a 100% option here for the Broncos linebackers. And like you said, the matchup is a great one. So excited to see kind of what happens and how it plays out this Thursday. But I'd imagine Josey Jewell is the 100% guy again.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Talking of missed tackles, any hope that Drew Sanders would steal some playing time from these two was kind of shot, because he was one of the biggest culprits of those missed tackles. So yeah, you're gonna have to play the waiting game with him, I think.
I think so.
The next sort of part of this game I wanted to talk about was that Denver pass rush. So it was great to see Nick Bonitto and Jonathan Cooper, that sort of partnership continue to get it done after that Gregory trade. Bonitto especially has really got after it the last few games, hasn't he? Yeah. And he has the better pressure rate of the two as well. I still think Cooper is the better player. But again, I don't think there's a huge amount to choose between them. So I'm leaning, if I have to choose between those two players, I'm leaning more toward Cooper most weeks, purely because he has a larger role. But that said, I'm kind of fading both this week because they're up against the Chiefs, and we know what Mahomes is like. He just evades sacks for fun. He's been taken down only 4 times all season. It's just not a great matchup for opposition pass rushers. Kind of fading Bonitto and Cooper for that reason.
Yeah, we're lockstep in the same thought process here for sure. I am slightly higher on Jonathan Cooper this week. I think I have him as edge 34. He played more than Nick Bonitto. He had a decent pass rush grade, decent win rate last week as well. Just didn't get the sacks that Bonitto did, right? But this is not the week to really kind of play around with those guys. Mahomes has the lowest pressure to sack conversion rate in the entire league at 5.7%. And like you said, just 4 sacks all year. So a tough guy to take down for a pass rush that is not one of the better ones in the league. So I would be trying to avoid those guys. But anything else from the Broncos that is worth touching on, or do you want to look at the Chiefs?
I want to look at the Chiefs and the Nick Bolton situation. I'm really missing Nick Bolton. We all are, right? Unless we're wise enough to pick up and quick enough to pick up Tranquil as a sort of a stopgap. I'm kind of hopeful that Bolton can come back this week after sort of being a limited participant in practice on Tuesday, I think it was. But I've kept him out of my weekly rankings until he either practices in full or we hear some positive news about his chances of suiting up. It would be a great matchup if he can make it back, as we know, again, from your chart, that the Chiefs tend to give up a lot of tackles to opposition. Sorry, that the Broncos give up a lot of tackles to opposition linebackers. But if he can't go, it's got to be Tranquil all the way. Again, he's played the last 2 games, every down in those 2 games, and he's put up 17 tackles and a forced fumble. I kind of feel, I don't know how you feel about this, but I do kind of feel a little bit sorry for Willie Gay. It feels like he just can't catch a break. There's always somebody ahead of him. Even when Bolton goes down, Tranquil steps in and Gay plays the understudy. It's got to be super frustrating for him.
Yeah, I imagine it is. The Spagnolo has just never viewed him, I guess, as an every down player. He's always kind of been second fiddle there, regardless of who the LB1 is. And like you said, I think it feels like Nick Bolton might play this week. I feel like it was a game time decision in week 5. I don't know. I know they played or he at least showed up, and I think they were looking to see if he was going to play or not. I don't know. I'm remembering that wrong, but I did put him in the rankings this week. I put him at LB6, but it's kind of like one of those ones. I could change it if necessary, but if he's not ready to go, then Drew Tranquil kind of steps in, and it's kind of like an all or nothing thing with Drew Tranquil, right? It's either Nick Bolton plays and then we don't play Drew Tranquil at all, or Nick Bolton is out and then Drew Tranquil skyrockets up the rankings, because that's just kind of how they've deployed these guys this season, is that Tranquil only has a role if Nick Bolton is not in the lineup, and he doesn't seem to move Willie Gay or Leo Chanel down the depth chart at all.
That's it.
All right. Let's go to the Baltimore Ravens at the Tennessee Titans. So the London game, Jace, you got boots on the ground here as well over there in London. I don't think you're going to the game. Is that correct?
I'm not this weekend. No, I'm away. I'm away on holiday this weekend. But if I was here, it'd be the one I would have chosen to go and see.
Yeah. Seems like a fun one, and we would get to see maybe potentially Kyle Hamilton in person. We've talked about him a fair bit on this show, but he's another guy I know wasn't a strong week last week, but looking at the deployment for Hamilton last week with Marcus Williams back, I think that's kind of the main thing to kind of focus on here, because he only played 30% of his snaps deep last week, but played up 42% in the box. He saw 24% in the slot, and that allowed him to kind of hover a little bit more near the line of scrimmage. And he's going to be now in position to put up fantasy production on a weekly basis, as long as Marcus Williams is in the lineup and Hamilton doesn't necessarily have to play back, especially against a Tennessee Titans team that you're not too concerned about having to, defend the pass against as much. So they probably don't need to play a lot of too high safety. They could play Kyle Hamilton down in the box a little bit more to help protect against Derrick Henry. I think this is a great matchup for Hamilton. So he's still inside my top 10 this week, even though it wasn't like an amazing week last week. Obviously the 3-sack game is the peak, but we're going to hope for at least a strong tackle game for Kyle Hamilton this week. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, he's still in my top 10 as well. He's my DB6 this week. Nice. But he has cooled a little bit since that massive game against was it the Colts in week 3? He had that interception of Watson in week 4, but he's barely rushed the passer at all since that huge sort of 3-sack game. That would be okay if his tackle numbers were solid, but he's kind of disappointed on that front too. I kind of wonder if we might see a modest game from him this week, because the Titans don't give up a huge amount of tackles to opposition safeties. But clearly, I'm still high on him, hence why I've got him as my DB6. So he's the kind of guy that just could go off on any week. And like you say, it's nice to see his usage settle down, or his alignment settle down a little bit. I think it was that Colts game, wasn't it, where he played almost exclusively in the slot, just blitzing a ton. But yeah, it's nice to see his alignment, his usage settle down a little bit. Really looking forward to seeing what he can do over the course of the season. Just not sure if it'll be his week this week. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, we want to see him, because you're right. The tackle numbers haven't quite been there for him, but I think with this kind of shift in alignment, I think it does help him at least long-term, rest of season, as long as he can kind of maintain that usage. It should be a positive thing for him going forward. At least I would hope so. We'll see what happens this week, like you said, against the Titans. But anything else on the Ravens that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I guess we should talk about the linebackers just briefly. Just to say, it's been, Pat Crane and Roquan Smith have been putting on a show this year, haven't they? Really? Yeah. I was looking at it earlier. Between the two players, they've combined for 89 tackles, 5 sacks, and 5 pass breakups in 5 games. That's just incredible. It kind of has, disappointed those of us who were hoping for something from Trenton Simpson earlier in the year. But his time will come eventually. It's just it's looking like it's going to be a next year thing for him, the way things are going, I think.
Yeah, it feels like it, right? Because I think Patrick Queen is a free agent at the end of the year. They didn't pick up his 5th year option, so he's the thing is he's played well for Baltimore this year, and since Roquan Smith has come over, but I just worry that they probably don't want to pay 2 linebackers too heavily, right? Just because they've already paid Roquan Smith, and it's a lot of money to spend on a position that isn't typically that valuable for the NFL. So that's I guess my main concern with Patrick Queen in Baltimore for next year. I don't know that he'll stay there, but I mean this year, yeah, he's been amazing. I definitely have both of them inside. I think the top 20 this week for my linebackers, just because they've been so productive. And yeah, again, if Tennessee leans into the run again, that only helps linebacker production as well. So we'll see what happens there. But
for sure. Yeah, they did talk about wanting to bring him back before the season started, but talk is cheap. We'll have to see how that plays out. Like you say, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to pay 2 linebackers the kind of money that Queen could get elsewhere, and that's what it comes down to, really.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm sure there'll be a market for him too, especially considering how well he's played, and he's got those flashy plays in his highlight reel that the agent could put together for other teams and stuff. So I think there'll be a market for him, and as a first rounder as well. So how about the Titans linebackers? Because this group has been kind of interesting, right? Azeez Al-Shaair, we kind of knew would be their LB1 this season. But I guess what we weren't expecting necessarily was Jack Gibbens, who has stepped up and been efficient over the past few weeks, right? He's actually been playing around 80% of snaps for 3 straight weeks now. And you look at his tackle efficiency last week, 21.2%, came up with 11 total tackles. Azeez Al-Shaair had 12. So these guys are coming off a strong week here. The Ravens, another decent matchup for linebackers. So how are you feeling about Jack Gibbens going forward?
Yeah, he slides into the back half of my my top 50 linebackers. I can't remember exactly where he's at, but in that sort of 40 to 45 range. Yeah. The snap share is pretty decent. He's not going to keep pace with the every down linebackers over the course of the season, but like you say, that tackle efficiency has been pretty damn good. So we have to give him props for that. I wonder whether there might be a shift in terms of who they favor as the primary linebacker there. I expected it to be Al-Shaair coming into the season, and I'm not surprised that it's been that way so far. And there's no signs of them moving away from Al-Shaair towards Gibbons. But I just wonder whether, I think Al-Shaair is on a 1-year contract. So I wonder whether they start to give Gibbons more time with one eye toward the future.
That would be interesting. Yeah, I haven't really seen like any kind of signs to do that, but if they're not interested in Al-Shaair long term, then why not give the guy more run? But yeah, I feel like 80% is still a decent amount of snaps, right? To kind of get a good look at a guy, right? But yeah, that is an interesting call. I think Al-Shaair is played well, though. He's been one of their he's 62.1 grade, but yeah, Jack Gibbons is a little bit better, 69.4 this season as far as the PFF grades go. So very similar there. It's hard to kind of base a lot on that, just how coaches feel about them, but it does play a little bit in how they're playing. So I think Al-Shaair's he's not really done anything to kind of hurt his chances at keeping that job, I guess I would say. But yeah, there is something at least to keep in mind there as far as them looking to the future. But yeah, then the other thing too, you mentioned Jack Gibbons, your LB 40 to 45 range. I have him as LB 44, so we're like in the exact same range.
Oh, there you go.
for this week. It's just as good as he's been, right? Like it's just hard to put an 80% guy over a lot of the like 100% guys or 90% and higher guys, because we know that the main thing is opportunity, right? So that 20% of snaps could make a big difference, especially if Baltimore's offense doesn't play a ton. So just something to keep in mind there for Jack Gibbons if you're starting him. Want to go on to the next game here, Washington, Atlanta?
Let's do it.
All right. So yeah, Commanders and Falcons. What do we got here? Where do you want to start? I'll let you start.
I really want to start with Chase Young. It feels like the only place to start. I'm loving his comeback tour. It's kind of the performance that we all hoped for, but weren't convinced that he would be able to do. 27 pressures, 4 sacks, a 20.9% pressure rate, 4th in the league. And, you know, he's done it against some really tough opposition as well, with the exception of the Bears last week. Garrett Bowles, Deion Dawkins, Jordan Mailata. That's some pretty tough. That's some pretty tough opposition, I think. And this week he's got the Falcons, and they've given up the 5th most sacks among all teams this year. Obviously, Jake Matthews is a decent left tackle, but he's allowed 4 sacks this year. I think Young has a chance to continue his hot streak. But let's just gloss over the tackle production. Let's leave it on a high, right?
Yeah. We're banking on the big plays for sure so far. But I mean, the tackle production could come, right? Like 89% of snaps last week. He's out there. He's really not leaving the field all that much, but he's been awesome. This has been exactly what we were kind of hoping to see from Chase Young. And, you know, I know the injuries and stuff kind of derailed him a little bit, like you said, but career high pass rush grade in week 5 for his entire NFL career with a 92.1. He posted 11 pressures, which was the most pressures by any player so far this season. Added the sack on there. I got him locked in inside that top 20 every single week at this point, as long as he doesn't change anything. Potentially higher, like this week, he's edge 11 for me. I really like the matchup again. So this is the first time that he's cracked the top 12 for me this season. So excited for him to have a big game or let me down, and then I have to move him way down. But yeah, there'll be somebody that lets me down. We talk about that every week, but there's always someone. But man, Chase Young, he has been so good this season. It's been nice to see.
He really has, and it'd be remiss not to mention his partner in crime, Montez Sweat as well. He's had a good start to the year himself. Being a little bit more sort of efficient at converting pressures into sacks than Young, but I'm more than happy to ride that Sweat wave. As disgusting as that sounds, while it continues, I'm all in on both.
I like it. Yeah, Montez Sweat has been awesome as well. Yeah, I think I have him inside the top 15 as well this week. It's hard to keep them too far separated, I guess, because they've both been awesome. They both play a ton. That defensive line is really good. How about with the Washington linebackers? Because Jamin Davis, not the start to the year that we had hoped for. It was around 65% or so of snaps through the first 2 games, but has played over 80% in each of the past 3 games. So that's been nice to see. How do you feel about this group here? Were you surprised to see, I guess, Cody Barton be the LB1 there? And do you have any hope for Jamin Davis for the rest of the season?
It was one of those situations that I could see going either way. I was hoping it would be Davis. I feel like, it was his time. He's kind of sat there waiting for his time to come. But some of that off-field stuff kind of concerned me a little bit. To the point where, I kind of thought it wouldn't surprise me hugely if Barton kind of ran with the every down role, at least to start the season. Like you say, Davis is kind of hovering around that sort of 80% snap share, but he's done very little with it, especially if you compare him to someone like, Jack Gibbons, we were just talking about a minute ago. Davis has got 29 tackles in 5 games, 11.7% tackle efficiency. Not dreadful, but not quite where we want it to be. And no big plays to speak of outside of a single sack against Denver, I think it was earlier in the season. Like I say, Cody Barton isn't anything too special, but he's dominating the snap share and he's been more productive so far. So I can't see that changing.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's going to change. And like you said, I think that offseason did seem to have an impact on his potential to be their guy that they trust on an every down role. So it could potentially hurt his future there in Washington as well if things don't improve. But yeah, I'm happy to start Cody Barton every week. He's a guy that we got for super cheap in drafts this year, and even off waiver wires early in the season as well. But anything else for Washington, or you want to move to Atlanta?
Yeah, let's talk about Atlanta. So that sort of, it's a tasty matchup for the Falcons defensive line. Sam Howell's been sacked more than any other quarterback in the league, an average of almost 6 times per game. He must be so sore. But the question is, I think, do the do the Falcons have the players to take advantage of that matchup? They've had more success rushing from the interior with David Onyemata and, to a lesser extent, sort of Grady Jarrett. I think they're 1 and 2 in total pressures for the Falcons so far this year. But maybe this is the game where some of the other guys, the edge guys who have been disappointing so far, can make an impact. I'm kind of looking at Bud Dupree, Arnold Ebiketie, and maybe even Caden Ellis if he's allowed to rush the pass more often than he has in the absence of Troy Anderson. So, yeah, I like the matchup, just not convinced the Falcons have what it takes to take advantage of that matchup.
Yeah, this is exactly how I feel about it. It's a great matchup. It should be on paper at least. And Sam Howell, like you said, leads the league in sacks, the highest pressure to sack conversion rate in the league as well for quarterbacks. But there's nobody really to be too excited about on this Falcons defensive line. Somebody's going to get a sack. It's almost a guarantee. It's just a matter of picking out who it's going to be. I have more faith in probably the defensive tackles than the edge defenders at this point. I mean, I called him Dud Dupree. Yeah,
you were right.
He's been a dud. Yeah, but Dupree, who's maybe now going to be called Dud Dupree because look, he played 73% of snaps and didn't manage a single pressure. Had a 0% win rate in Week 5 against Houston. And Houston, they're a decent offensive line over there, but that is just like terribly inefficient, right? So I don't have like a ton of faith in Bud Dupree. It's there, like I said, somebody's going to get a sack. It's just you're rolling the dice. Maybe throw a dart on one of them and hope for the best. But I'm not going to try to pick out which one it's going to be. I'd rather try to find another matchup somewhere else, or at least bank on maybe the defensive tackles in DT required leagues, Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, because they've been decent pass rushers still this season as well.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because Dud Dupree, as he will now forever be known, he's the guy with the lion's share of the snaps at the edge position. But like you say, he's been really ineffective. I'd like to see Ebiketie get more run. I don't know what he is yet, really, but it's kind of hard when he's not even seeing half the available defensive snaps. It's got to be tough. Like you say, someone's going to get a sack. Maybe in the deepest of best ball leagues, you could add one of these guys and just pray for a miracle. But yeah, rather you than me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Arnold Ebiketie too, the second round pick for them a year ago. And I thought maybe he would see more snaps this year, but it's been kind of buried on the depth chart a little bit too. And just another guy that just hasn't shown a lot. So maybe that's been part of the problem why he can't climb up that depth chart too. But the other thing with Atlanta is their linebackers. Nate Landman went up to 100% of snaps this past week, which was nice to see because we want more every down linebackers. Not necessarily like the most effective tackler so far this season, but he's doing the job. He's been decent. I think I have him as LB 36 this week. I still have Caden Ellis a little bit higher, but do you have a preference for one of these guys, assuming they're both playing 100% of snaps?
I guess it depends to an extent on the scoring, but less so than it would have done when Ellis was in a role where he would be rushing the passer more than he has so far this season. And obviously that's partly as a result of the injury to Troy Anderson. Landman, last week was a slight drop off from what we saw in terms of production in Week 4 against the Jags, but we got to follow the snap count, the opportunity, as you say. What was really encouraging was, as you pointed out, he played every down. Clearly, the Falcons trust him, and I think we should too, even if the matchup against the Commanders could be a little better.
Yeah, I'm fine plugging him in this week. There's a few other linebacker situations that I'm not overly fond of right now that are maybe bigger name players that I'm trying to avoid this week until we get further clarity on what's going on there. But Nate Landman, like you said, he's got the role, so I'm fine to plug him in if necessary, just because of those snaps. And as long as he's efficient with his opportunities, then he can be a decent IDP starter in those deeper leagues as well. So I like that for Landman. Anything else, Washington, Atlanta, or you want to move to Minnesota, Chicago?
I wasn't going to talk about it, but the Derek Forrest stroke Percy Butler
Right.
situation is going to be an interesting one to follow. Obviously, Forrest is done,
Yeah.
and we saw Percy Butler step in a little bit last week. So really interested to see. I'm not going to start Butler this week in any leagues, and I don't recommend anybody else does either. But it's definitely a situation to monitor, I think, and see how that division of snaps really plays out.
Yeah, there's always room for these guys that are playing, 100% of snaps at the safety position in deeper leagues. And you never know. They come up with some big plays or something like that makes all the difference in the world as far as what they do on a weekly basis. So just another player to kind of keep in mind there because, yeah, Derek Forrest on IR now. So it looks like Percy Butler is going to be the replacement. So something else to monitor there in Washington, but it's most likely going to be a deep safety role as well, right? We know Cameron Curl is going to eat up those box snaps, which we love about him. So,
yeah.
Let's go to the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. So I think maybe the first thing that I want to talk about with this one is Marcus Davenport. I think has had a couple of nice games now in a row. I know, this isn't the player that it's taken a long time for this player basically to be productive, and people have been frustrated with him for a long time. A former first round pick. He's had to deal with injuries and snap shares and stuff like that haven't been ideal for him, but 79% of snaps last week, 7 pressures, 2 sacks over the past 2 games. This is another positive matchup against Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. Fields takes a lot of sacks. The Bears allow a lot of pressure. So the volume is there for him. The opportunity, the pass rush metrics have been, not amazing last game, but typically this has been one of the better pass rushers in the league, even on smaller sample size. But I think there's potential here for Marcus Davenport to be maybe a edge streamer this week. I think I have him as edge 29. So potential streaming option this week against Chicago. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, it kind of feels like a Matrix-esque deja vu with Davenport, doesn't it? I feel like we've been here so many times. He's kind of that black cat that keeps popping up, making us feel both excited and uneasy at the same time. The question really with him is not has he got the talent? We've seen that in those small windows where he's been able to play, he can play. The question really is can he stay healthy? And injuries are impossible to predict, or near impossible to predict. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. It does help that he lines up on the right edge. That works in his favor, I think. The left side of that offensive line for the Bears is really, really poor. That's being kind. Larry Borum in particular is so bad. So yeah, I'm not like you ready to anoint Davenport as a good edge rusher, but yeah, I like his matchups, so I can totally understand having him ranked at where did you say 29?
Yeah, edge 29. So yeah, in DL leagues, he probably falls a little further as you put in some of the better D tackles in there and stuff. But yeah, he's burned us so many times in the past, right? As soon as we start to get hopeful about him, that's when he, turns around and puts up goose eggs or gets injured or something like that. So that's the one thing to kind of keep in mind there. But yeah, like I said, I do like the matchup this week. Let's assume that he plays that regular 70-something% snap role and doesn't get hurt in the game. I think there's potential there for Marcus Davenport this week. The other thing in Minnesota, as we always like to do, a little update on Ivan Pace and what is going on over there, because we love Ivan Pace, but hasn't really been the IDP asset that we I think could imagine him to be. But this was always kind of the problem with the Minnesota Vikings defense under Brian Flores, right? Is there's only really room for one linebacker to trust in IDP leagues. And this was part of the reason that I didn't love Brian Asamoah coming into this season, because I assumed he would be the LB2 there behind Jordan Hicks, and didn't think that there would be, enough production for Asamoah to go around. And that's kind of what Ivan Pace is getting here. And it's nice that Ivan Pace is at least the LB2 there and getting snaps, and he's on the field and has potential to put up big games if he if he's getting the opportunity, but we're still not trusting him. Like LB 53 is where he ranks for me this week. So outside of that top 50, there's plenty of other linebackers who are playing more snaps to trust. Maybe he gets some opportunity to rush the passer here and, again, gets a sack on Justin Fields or something like that would be nice, but it's not something you're trying to bank on, right? It is really a play for deeper leagues only at this point.
Yeah, you've nailed it there. And then the main takeaway really for me is that, this is an undrafted free agent we were talking about. Granted, he should have been drafted, but
yeah.
As you were saying, didn't expect him to beat Asamoah to that LB2 spot. So we've got to take what we're getting, and maybe there is some method in the madness because Hicks is actually playing some of his best football in years. I feel 29 combined tackles and a pass breakup in the last 2 games, and it's not just about production. He's performing well too. I think on the basis of what we're seeing, his pace is 50 to 60% snap share is likely to continue for the time being. But, like I say, he's shown he can hang with the best. And with Hicks set to become a free agent after 2023, the future looks bright for Pace. Just, not in the next few weeks, I don't think. And maybe not the rest of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's nice that they trust him. They're getting him on the field enough as an undrafted free agent, which it's a good thing. So for dynasty purposes, you still like that, but he's not somebody you're putting into lineups for the most part. And like you said, Hicks has been good. He's been really solid. Brian Flores has deployed a lot more zone, surprisingly this year, which has really helped that tackle efficiency stay up as well, which is nice. So that's another positive there for Jordan Hicks. I don't expect him to lose that LB1 role really this season, I'd imagine, unless he gets injured or something like that. But
yeah.
How about Harrison Smith? Because he's been kind of interesting, right? Really, really slow start to the year. The first 3 games for Harrison Smith, just 14 tackles. He did have a forced fumble in there. But the last 2 games, 24 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, obviously the 1 game, 1 forced fumble, 4 QB hits. The usage didn't really change for Harrison Smith. It's in any of the 5 weeks that he's been on the field, but the production definitely kind of came back to what we would expect closer to Harrison Smith to produce. Even as an older player, he's always been like an efficient IDP for the most part. So how do you feel about Harrison Smith and maybe even like compared to Cameron Bynum? Because Cameron Bynum's been on fire to start the year. So do you have a preference maybe for one of those two?
Yeah, I have a slight preference for Bynum, but there's only 2 places between them in my rankings. Okay. I got a bit of flack for having 2 Vikings safeties in my top 10 last week, but I feel like it's justified on the basis of what we're seeing. I love Harrison Smith. I always have. And I, like everybody else, I was getting a bit worried with his sort of quiet start to the year. Mm-hmm. It's a position that we're often quite happy to stream. So I imagine there's a few fancy managers out there that are cursing their luck after they moved on from Smith. But if there's a lesson to be learned, it's just that, a reminder perhaps that it is a volatile position and not to give up after what was essentially at that point a really, really small sample size. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't be happier that he's kind of proving everyone wrong. And it's more than just that 3 sack performance against the Panthers a few weeks back. That tackle rate has been impressive too. If I've got one small gripe, it'd be nice to see him make some of those big plays in coverage that he became famous for over his career. But I'm being really picky and really greedy at that point. So
it's understandable though, right? Like we know what Harrison Smith is capable of. I know he's, getting older. He's in his I don't know, mid 30s now. It feels like probably early 30s, but it feels like mid 30s. But yeah, he's a solid player. The usage, like you said, it's all there for him. I don't mind putting both of those guys in the top 10. I think they've earned it at this point, Bynum and Harrison Smith. I do have a slight preference. I've just moved Harrison Smith for the first time over Cameron Bynum for this week, but again, they're super close. And yeah, it's both of them have been performing very well. So I do like that. Anything for Chicago? Because this is not like an overly interesting team for IDP, but did anybody stand out that's worth talking about here for you?
Not really. Yeah. Sorry, Bears fans, but yeah, it's not it's not a team that that gets me too excited on the IDP front. They have some players in there, but yeah, nothing too crazy to want to bring up now.
Yeah, it's nothing really to kind of go into detail to, because we kind of know what they are on defense. And I mean, I think Kyler Gordon, the slot corner there, is eligible to return from IR. I haven't seen anything about him playing this week or anything like that, but that's just maybe another player that could be interesting on Chicago if he does get activated. But other than that, we know who they are: TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, Jaquan Brisker, Eddie Jackson if he plays, if not Elijah Hicks. And then the defensive line we are staying away from. Let's go on to the Seattle Seahawks at the Cincinnati Bengals. Where do you want to start with this one?
I'm really looking forward to seeing the Seahawks come off of their bye. Their defense just flat out dominated the Giants, didn't they? In week 4, 11 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and two interceptions. One of the players I was most eager to see in that last game, but who barely played, of course, was Jamal Adams. So he looked like he was going to play a massive part in that game. He only had 9 snaps before, unfortunately, suffering the concussion, but he still managed to record two tackles and a QB hurry. It looks like he might be back from the concussion. I think I saw Pete Carroll with some sort of promising news about how he expects Adams to clear the concussion protocol. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in the fold and seeing what he can do. It feels like a long time since he was on my fantasy radar. But yeah, he's a guy that I'm interested in, and that, like I say, that performance in just that small, super small sample size of 9 snaps has got me a little more excited than I was even before that game. So where do you stand on Jamal Adams?
Yeah, it was nice to see him back on the field. Unfortunately, whatever it was, just a handful of snaps, really. So we didn't get to see the thing that I want to see mostly is kind of how these safeties will be deployed, right? Like, it does sound like he'll play this week. Hopefully he can stay, healthy for this game. But when he was out there, him, Julian Love, and Quandre Diggs all played together on those 4 snaps. So all 3 safeties were out there at the same time. I don't know if that's something that's planned for an entire game's worth of snaps, how sustainable that is, but that would be the main thing that I'm kind of looking at, is where does Julian Love and Jamal Adams kind of fall, and what does the deployment look like and the alignment for those guys? It feels like they want to use Jamal Adams in a typical Jamal Adams role in the box and rushing the passer, but coming off another injury here, the concussion, I do wonder if maybe there's a potential that he's eased back in this week to try to avoid another injury. So that would be the one thing to that kind of, I guess, has me hesitant about Jamal Adams, at least for this week.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it's quite possibly that he could be could be a slow reintroduction to the team. So. Yeah. The next player I want to talk about in this game was Jordan Brooks. So he's yet to log a full workload since returning to the lineup, but he was getting close. And he showed us what he's capable of, despite not playing every down. He had 39 combined tackles and 3 sacks in 4 games. You've got to think that with an extra week of rest during the bye, he's going to come back to near or at 100% this week. Now, I would be higher on him for that reason, but I don't think the Bengals are a great matchup for linebackers. So I won't be surprised if his performance isn't quite at the same level as we've seen so far this year, even if he does play more snaps.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's at least potential there that they put him back on like a full workload in basically a near every down role, because we haven't really seen that from him so far this season. But it does help coming off the bye. He's looked healthy. He's been efficient. He's been effective. So that would be the main thing. I think I have him as LB 24 this week. So like you, I think if I like the matchup a little bit more, or if I was sure of the usage, then I'd probably move him up a little bit higher, because he's been such an effective tackler, and this is such a great defense for linebacker tackles. But the matchup and the slight uncertainty coming off of the bye. What his role is going to look like is the only thing that keeps him as the low end LB2 for me this week. But yeah, I think there's definitely potential that he could be a full-time player this week as well.
For sure, for sure. The next guy I want to talk about was Nick Scott. Let's talk about him for a minute. It was interesting to see him play only 67% of the available defensive snaps against the Cardinals, I think it was last week. And conversely, Jordan Battle had a season high 39% in that game. And we saw something happen a few weeks back against the Ravens. And then the following week, Scott played almost every down again, while Battle barely saw the field. So all the same, it's something to keep an eye on. And I think if fantasy managers have a more reliable option, or at least someone who plays every down, then it'd be wise to kind of sit Scott until we have a more of an idea as to how this plays out. That, you know, the safety position is deep in IDP. It shouldn't be hard to find a replacement.
Yeah, this one felt like it was something to do with, like, just related to his level of play in the game. He didn't seem to have any kind of injury or anything that they took him off the field for. He was kind of coming in and out of the game with Jordan Battle, like you said, and he's had his struggles this season. It definitely appears at least possible that the team may want to lean into Jordan Battle a little bit more going forward. And Battles looked good. He earned an 87.8 defensive grade in that last game, it included an 83.9 in coverage, just the 22 snaps. But Scott has earned just a 43.2 defensive grade this year, 40.7 coverage grade. So not great. He struggled a little bit. So I do wonder if there's potential here for them to kind of switch these guys, maybe gradually over time, over the next few weeks or so. But I don't know that they're particularly excited about Nick Scott at this point. So I've left Nick Scott off my rankings this week, just as kind of a point to, like you said, avoid him and see what the situation looks like going forward. But I am not playing Nick Scott. There's way too many safety options to trust instead, just in case there are some snap share shenanigans here with the Bengals safeties.
Definitely. Totally agree. The last player I want to touch on in this game is, and I probably should have talked about him earlier, given how he's been playing, is Trey Hendrickson. I mean, he's been as good as any edge rusher this year. 7 sacks, and I think he had a forced fumble as well in the last 5 games. 6 sacks in just the last 3 games. Granted, he's done this against some pretty suspect offensive lines, but he does deserve the credit for getting it done. Yeah. You know, surprisingly, Geno Smith has only been dropped 7 times in 4 games. You know, that offensive line he plays behind is pretty poor. It's nothing to get too excited about. But I think Hendrickson in the form he's in, he's got to fancy his chances of adding to his sack totals this week. Where are you at on Trey Hendrickson? I mean, this isn't anything new, is it? We've seen him have huge seasons in the past. Again, he's one who the tackle volumes isn't there, never there. He's kind of like a Ngakwe in that sense. But yeah, you don't really care about that if he's posting a sack or even 2 sacks each week. So yeah, where are you at on Hendrickson?
Yeah, I'm with you. I love Hendrickson. I mean, 2.5 sacks last week. I think I put him up as edge 8 this week, and it's all in the pass rush metrics. Like you said, 91.3 pass rush grade on the year, which is 3rd best among all edge defenders. He's seeing a strong snap share. He's not being limited on early downs or anything like that. He's up over 70%. He's just been really good. We've seen him be a really good pass rusher before. We just saw him kind of limited in snaps a little bit, but it doesn't seem like they're doing that with him this year. So there's at least potential that maybe he gets a couple more tackles, like I said, similar to Chase Young, right? But because he's at least on the field for those opportunities. But you're really playing him for the big plays. And that's the main thing with Trey Hendrickson. And he's been delivering. The pass rush metrics are all there for him. So yeah, he's a top 10 edge for me this week against the Seahawks. And, you know, comparatively, Sam Hubbard, 56.8 pass rush grade this year. We know he's not the better pass rusher, even though sometimes he delivers on the sacks when Trey Hendrickson doesn't. But Hubbard more of the run defending edge defender of this group here, of this duo, I guess. But yeah, still love Trey Hendrickson. So this has been a nice start to the year for him for sure.
Yeah, it kind of makes you. He doesn't seem to get the kudos that he deserves. I think no one was really talking about him in any great way before the season started, or not that I saw, at least. But this is a guy that's had, was it 20 sacks? A 20-sack season he had a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And that's any other guy that had produced on that level, we'd be pretty excited for. But it just seems that Hendrickson doesn't always get the credit he deserves. I think maybe I'm just running in the wrong circles, and there's a massive Hendrickson fan club out there somewhere.
Yeah, they're all in Cincinnati. Yeah, no, but he's been good. Like, he's definitely underrated for sure. He's been somebody that I was scooped up in a ton of best ball leagues this year because it just would constantly fall down the ranks. Like, nobody's really that interested in him. And maybe some of it has to do with that smaller snap share and not playing on those early downs. But that, again, that's not what we're drafting Trey Hendrickson for, right? And so far, he's delivered on those big plays, which has definitely been nice to see. But yeah, there's nothing else really with the Bengals. Again, we've talked about their linebacker situations a bunch as well, with Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Those guys both getting healthy snap shares now, which is very nice to see. But let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers and the Cleveland Browns. And I think we kind of have to start with Nick Bosa, who has a pretty quiet start to the year, at least for IDP purposes, right? So this is, I think, what does he have? Just 1.5 sacks on the year. Yeah, 1.5 sacks on the season, but everything else is there for him, right? 93 pass rush grade, 27 total pressures. He leads all edge defenders in QB hits with 12, a 28.9% win rate, which is second behind only Myles Garrett, who's also in this game. And he's facing off against Deshaun Watson, I think, if Deshaun Watson plays, who has a 25% pressure to sack conversion rate, which is the 6th highest in the league. So I love Nick Bosa. Anybody frustrated with the start? I mean, you don't panic here. You don't take him out of lineups. I have him as edge 4. Any concern at all for Nick Bosa for you?
None at all. I understand the questions that were starting to get asked at the start of the year, because this is an elite guy who only had a handful of games last year without a sack. But look at your chart there. For those watching on YouTube, he was still generating pressure at an elite rate. His win rate was elite. It was just a matter of time before the sacks came, right? Yeah. He's like you said there. He's a kind of guy that he's a kind of like a set it and forget it type of player, irrespective of his matchup. This week he's facing what's actually a sneaky good sort of Cleveland Browns offensive line, but if they have a weakness, I feel like it's on the outside. So I like Bosa to make an impact here and to kind of continue that streak that he's starting to put together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love Nick Bosa, and yeah, he's definitely set and forget. You don't ever panic just because he didn't get a sack one week or anything like that. Just leave him in the lineups, and that production will come. How about also on the 49ers, Talanoa Hufanga? How do you feel about Hufanga? Because I think a lot of people get excited about him the past 2 years in drafts or in IDP leagues because, he's got the flashy plays and they see the hair. He looks like Troy Polamalu and everything out there, and assume that he's going to be producing like Troy Polamalu, but hasn't had more than 5 tackles in any game so far this year. And I think the one thing that is, kind of sneaky about Hufanga that not a lot of people realize is that he's actually played 69% of his snaps deep this year. He's not like this box banger safety that he kind of appears to be if you were first watching him or watching his highlights or anything like that.
Yeah, a big sort of meh for me with Hufanga. There's not a lot to really say. His start to the season kind of reminds me of where he was. He had that fast start last year, right? And he was looking like a world beater, but then he kind of tailed off a little bit. He was still picking up the odd interception before their bye, which I think was around the midseason. But his tackle volume and tackle efficiency wasn't really there. He was kind of like a boom or bust player, and that's, I feel like, what he's looking like this year. I dropped him pretty sharply in my rankings this week. Where did I have him? Let's have a quick look. Yeah, he's all the way down at number 45. So safety, so DB 45, safety 41 for me. So that's sort of the safety 4 range, which I know is low, but I'm not his biggest fan as a fantasy player.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, anybody else that we see playing like 70% of their snaps from a free safety role, where that's the range that they're playing in, right? So there's something about Hufanga that I think you said, I think it's still that early 2022 season that is sticking with people because he was so productive and he had so many big plays and he was exciting and he has the hair and all of that stuff. But it just hasn't translated in the long term for Hufanga. So he's somebody that's falling down my rankings as well. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see me I'll have him probably in the safety 3 range, probably going forward somewhere around there too. So yeah, it's just
now
it just hasn't
that, he will pick off Watson about 4 times, force a fumble, put up like 20 tackles. You know that's going to happen, right?
There's 100% like a pick 6 coming from Talanoa Hufanga this
Maybe
week. So
2.
yeah. Anybody else on San Francisco, or you want to talk about the Browns here?
Yeah, I'll talk about the Browns. So Zadarius Smith for a minute. He's not playing terribly. He's looked reasonably disruptive in maybe 2. I'm being slightly kind, but 2 of his 4 games, Cincy in week 1 and then the Ravens in week 4. It just hasn't come together for him yet. 0 sacks. And then it doesn't help him, or the perception of him, that Okoronkwo, on the other hand, has been able to produce sacks. I don't really like any of the Browns' edge rushers this week beyond Garrett, as mainly because Purdy is just he's a little bit like Geno Smith for me, in the sense that he doesn't take a lot of sacks despite playing behind a pretty rubbish offensive line outside of Trent Williams. That is the rest of that line. I'm not really that keen on, but yeah, Purdy just hasn't taken a bunch of sacks. So yeah, I don't think this is the week for Smith to break his duck. And Okoronkwo, Garrett all the way. You can never drop Garrett, but the other 2, not so keen on.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I'm ever benching Myles Garrett in an IDP league, but Zadarius Smith, I'm still hopeful for like rest of season. But this isn't the best matchup for him. 81.1 pass rush grade on the year. He's got 13 total pressure, so he's fine. It's just the sacks haven't been there yet, but they should come at some point. So yeah, it just might not potentially be this week. So we may be waiting on that a little bit longer. How about the Browns linebackers? Because this is, again, it's a rotating group. There's a different guy each week. Last week or the week before their bye, it was Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah who led the team in snap share, and I think that kind of had to do with defending Lamar Jackson a little bit more of a mobile defender. Do you feel like maybe it's an Anthony Walker week? Or do you feel like it's going to be JOK again? What's your read on this Browns linebacker room?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that I can't choose between 2 guys in terms of how they're going to produce, I look toward the snap share in the most recent game and see how that's trending, and I hope that that's trending over more than 1 game. But like you say, it's been yo-yoing. It's just a situation I don't really want any part in. Maybe as an LB sort of 4, I could understand picking up and starting someone like JOK or Walker, especially during bye weeks, or certainly bye weeks where there's more than 2 teams on a bye. But otherwise, yeah, I don't really want a huge part of this. It's not something I really want to invest in. I think Kyle hit on this last week. JOK in Dynasty, but that aside, nah, not keen on rostering any of these guys.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you there. So let's move on to the New Orleans Saints at the Houston Texans. Then I'll let you kick us off wherever you want to start with this group.
Yeah, Pete Werner. I feel like he's been okay, but now we're kind of still waiting for him to really take off. 12.4% tackle efficiency. It's below where we'd want it, but it's not terrible. He's had 1 week with double-digit tackles and at least 7 tackles in 4 of his 5 games. He's had a couple of splash plays, but I feel like we need, and maybe I'm being harsh, a little bit more to give us that real confidence that we can plug him in and be assured of a reasonable amount of weekly points. The Texans game, I will say, is one where I feel like he could produce good tackle volume. So hopefully this week is the week where Werner just goes off.
Yeah, I really like Pete Werner as a player. I guess my concern, at least heading into this week, is the decrease in snaps in week 5. I couldn't seem to find a reason why. There was no injury news on him, and there was the blowout, so they did pull those guys. But even before that game got out of hand, he wasn't playing that every down role that we had seen from him in the previous weeks. I think he was up over 90% or even above 95% in the 4 previous games, but dropped to just 57% this week, which probably is closer to 75% if you take away those blowout garbage time snaps where none of the starters played. So that's kind of my concern with Werner, at least heading into this week. I want to see if maybe there's a chance that they're changing the defense a little bit, or maybe that was a 1 week thing, and that he'll go back to that full-time role. So I've pushed him down a little bit in the rankings. He's LB 42 for me. He's one of those linebackers this week that I'm not overly excited about because I want to see what the usage is. And this Saints defense too, like you talked about the tackle efficiency, this is one of the most man-heavy defenses in the league, and we've seen that be a killer for linebacker tackle efficiency as well. So that definitely plays a part in it. We've seen it with Demario Davis for sure, but it could be affecting Pete Werner here as well. And if he's not getting the full-time snaps, combined with the man-heavy defense for New Orleans, that's where he falls down the ranks for me, at least until I see a little bit more information, I guess, after this week to see if they go back to him in a full-time role. Yeah,
fair points. And then I want to just flip over to the Texans for a minute and talk about Jonathan Greenard. Mm-hmm. It was nice to see him, earn a bigger snap share again, 74%. That's kind of similar to the usage he had in the first 2 games of the year before Jerry Hughes and a player whose name I forget, Dylan Horton started eating into Greenard's playing time. Now, the question really with Greenard is can he do what we need him to do with that increased opportunity? I'm not as convinced as others seem to be about, or not as excited to be more specific about where Greenard is as a player. I was looking back through his history of production. He hasn't had a single game with 4 or more pressures since midway through the 2021 season. And he's only ever managed 4 or more in a single game 3 times in his career. I know he's had, he's shown the ability to convert pressures into sacks at a rate higher than the average, but it's a risky game, assuming that can continue, I think. But as I say, he's got a big enough role to make a difference, and maybe he can be one of those guys that earns production through volume. And I do like his matchup this weekend. He's on the left side of that D line, and which means he'll be playing. Sorry, he's on the right side, isn't he? Which means he'll be playing against Trevor Penning, who's been he's just sucked this year. So yeah, kind of like the matchup.
Yeah. This was at least good to see, like, that Greenard he got his snaps backed up, because we talked about him with Kyle last week, how he was kind of trending down each week as far as snap share goes, but back up to 75%, like you said. So it becomes at least a little bit more reliable in that way, because he does have games where he puts up sacks, but like you said, not somebody that's overly consistent or is like such a good pass rusher that you have to have him in lineups, basically, right? More of a matchup based play. But yeah, I think I have him as edge 35. He's not somebody that I'm overly excited about. He's probably just going to kind of hang around in that range for me as an edge 3 for the rest of the season. But unless we see those pass rush metrics get way up, I'm not like overly excited about Greenard, like you say. No. Are
you up for talking about the Texans linebackers for a minute? I mean, this situation has been... It's been fun, but like super maddening at the same time, I think. We expected Perriman to run alongside Tua as the second every down linebacker last week, but but Blake Cashman, he's a name who some people might have forgotten. He kind of rose like a phoenix from the flames, didn't he? Played near a full-time role. Perriman had just under half of the snaps available, which surprised me a little bit. But I suspect they were kind of easing Perriman back into things after the wrist injury. And I'm reasonably confident he'll overtake Cashman this week. Perriman's not listed on the injury report, I did see. Right. I'm just keeping one eye on Christian Harris. Other people are more excited about him than I am. I think he's a poor player, but he just refuses to go away.
Yeah, I guess I'm not too concerned about Christian Harris, but I'm probably more concerned about Blake Cashman than I am Christian Harris, but not for this game. Like I'm with you. I think that Perriman was kind of eased in his first game back from injury, and I think he has the potential at least to overtake Cashman this week. I have Perriman is LB 37 and Cashman is LB 54. So I pushed them both down a little bit just because there is that uncertainty in how to deploy these guys. So I'd rather wait a week and see. But if you have to play somebody of those two, then I'm playing Perriman. Obviously, our guy Hanky Two Toes there, I have him as LB 19. I don't think he's in any danger of losing a decent sized role there. So it's just weird that they went with Blake Cashman. I mean, I guess Christian Harris wasn't available and Perriman was, coming off injury, but Blake Cashman just strikes me as a funny player. 1 percentile arm length. So he's basically like a T-Rex out there. He literally has like some of the shortest arms in the league for linebackers. He was chosen to play much more than Perriman, whose strength is run defense too, and against like a run-heavy Falcons defense, or Falcons offense led by Bijan Robinson. So you figure like they would lean into Perriman. So they really must have been easing him in with the injury. But to Cashman's credit, he played well. 82.7 defensive grade. He had 9 tackles, 2 for a loss. So those tiny arms didn't really hurt him too much. But I do think that Perriman kind of overtakes him this week. I think it'll be him and Two Toes there as the top 2 linebackers. And yeah, we'll see what Christian Harris does when he comes back. But I feel like he's fallen out of favor there with that Texans coaching staff because he just hasn't been good.
Yeah, they've been showing us every sign that they are not keen on him, haven't they? He was on a really short leash to start the season, and that kind of snapped. That leash snapped pretty fast, didn't it?
It really did. Yeah.
And then finally, I want to talk about Jalen Petre. So he's back. The tackle efficiency wasn't there against Pittsburgh in week 4, but no one was complaining because he forced a pair of fumbles, right? Last week against Atlanta was much more like the 2022 version of him. I think he tied 2-0 with a team leading 11 tackles, and he also added a pass breakup too. It might be difficult to replicate those kind of numbers against the Saints in this matchup. I don't think it's a great matchup for Petre, but I clearly like him a lot because he's ranked as the number 3, my DB3. This is really a case of sort of talent and history of production outweighing matchup for me, really.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got him as safety 4, so we're right there. The big difference, which I think is really funny, and this has kind of been the story for Petre. Even last year, he wasn't as productive when he lined up in the box, but he was much more productive when he lined up deep. So he's kind of an anomaly in that regard because that's not typically the case for these safeties. But you look at last week, 76% deep, just 14.5% in the box. And he posted 11 tackles, like you said. Whereas in week 4, when he came back, 55% deep, 37.5% of the box, just 2 tackles, right? So this has kind of been the story with him. He's one of those rare cases where when he's lined up deep, he seems to be better. So I guess we kind of hope for that for Petre because it's worked for him. Maybe he could see the play better and see it develop better. And he breaks down on and maybe doesn't get washed out by offensive linemen playing in the box either. He is a smaller safety,
he is.
Right?
Yeah.
So some of those things maybe kind of come into play for him. But I do seem to notice that he plays better, or is at least a better IDP when he's lined up deep, which is interesting.
I'd never picked up on that. That is really interesting. I did see he played a lot more snaps deep last week, but I'd never made that sort of correlation between his improved tackle volume and him playing deep. So that's interesting one to take away.
Yeah, I only noticed it because last year I remember between him and Jonathan Owens in this Texans defense, it was the kind of the same thing. Owens, when whoever had the more box snaps, was the least productive of the two safeties as far as tackles goes last season. For the most part, I think there might have been like a couple of games where that wasn't the case, but it was mostly the case for that season. So just I don't know, something that to kind of keep in mind or keep an eye on going forward, see if that actually makes sense and continues here.
I will do, yeah. Super interesting. And that kind of wraps up the Saints and the Texans for me.
Yeah. Let's do a quick ad break before we go on to the rest of the games here. And this one is from our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. And you ask how it works. Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection. And then you can win up to 25 times your money on any single entry. So I just noticed Prize Picks has IDP props on there. We got defensive players and 2 props that I like. Jose Jewell over 7.5 tackles on Thursday going against the Chiefs. You talked about it. The Chiefs are allowing over 20 tackles per game to the linebacker position. We also feel pretty good that Jose Jewell is going to go back to that 100% snap share role. So that should help his chances of getting the over there. And the other one I put in there is Patrick Queen over 7 total tackles on the year. He's been under 7 just once so far this season, and we've talked about how much we like him and his production so far. So how do you feel about those, Jace? You like Jose Jewell over 7.5 and Queen over 7?
I'm more confident in the Queen one than I am Jewell,
Nice.
and only because of that sort of. We're not 100% sure. We think that Jewell should be the every down guy this week, right, but we're not 100% sure. So that concerns me a little bit. But like you say, his matchup's really nice. Yeah, I like it. As I said to you before, I'm not having as much success with linebacker tackle props as I am with sacks this year. But yeah, that seems to me like a good one to go for.
Nice. I like it. So we'll head on over to Prize Picks. We'll put some money on there. And then, yeah, at Prize Picks too, the good thing is you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projection. So you could go to prizepicks.com/fantasy and use code fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/fantasy and use code fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, let's head to Indianapolis and Jacksonville. The main thing here to start with is the Colts linebackers, right? It feels like the obvious talking point because we know Shaquille Leonard was dealing with the groin injury. He didn't play last week. It seems like he might be back this week, but EJ Speed played basically a full-time role for Shaquille Leonard in his absence. So this has been a situation to kind of monitor all season, basically, because Leonard dealing with the injuries and everything like that. So what's your read on this Colts linebacker situation, Jace?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, we saw Speed play the every down role last week, but I think if we're honest, Leonard's injury kind of hastened what we already started to see. Speed was more productive through the first 4 weeks, despite playing 50 fewer snaps. And unfortunately, as you talked about on the show last week, and as we've all seen, Leonard looks like a shadow of the guy that we knew from a few years back. And it pains me to say that because he was one of my favorite players. Now, I wouldn't be massively surprised if Speed outsnaps Leonard. If Leonard comes back this week, and even if Leonard comes back, even if he's a few weeks off and comes back fully healthy, then yeah, again, I'm not 100% sure that he would have the kind of snap share that we expected him to have before the season started on an ongoing basis. So yeah, I'm probably not starting either guy unless Leonard is ruled out this week, in which case Speed becomes a solid play for me.
Yeah, the way I have them ranked right now, I don't have Leonard in the rankings just to wait and kind of see if he's actually playing or not. If he is playing, I'm with you. I think Speed is probably the one that I would rank ahead of him at this point for all the reasons that you just talked about. And yeah, it's just so hard to trust Leonard at this point, especially watching back on those games the past couple of weeks or so. He just has not looked like the same player. So that definitely concerns me for him. not a lot else here in Indianapolis that's overly interesting. I think Kwity Paye should be out of concussion protocol this week. He missed last week. So he's somebody that's been productive so far this year. And I kind of like, how do you feel about Kwity Paye this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced he's anything too special. Sure. To be frank, I mean, he's managed only 10 pressures in 4 games, and his pressure rate is below, I think it's below 10%, which is a bit off-putting. I was kind of high on him after his rookie year, but have we really seen the progression we want since? I'm not sure that we have.
Yeah, not quite yet, right? The pass rush metrics haven't really been there. Like, he's started off productive, but it's one of those ones where you're kind of concerned about that production regressing because those pass rush metrics aren't there, the pressure rates and the win rates and things like that. So there is concern there. And I think I talked about this with Josh when he was on, because he had talked about, the Colts sack conversion rate this season being up among the best in the league, but their pressure rate and everything like that was near the bottom of the league, right? So there was always the chance that they're going to regress, and I think we could potentially still see that this season. So don't mind Kwity Paye just as like a volume play right now, and I'm a believer in the talent eventually coming to fruition. I think we talked about him. We did a breakout podcast this off season and talked about him there as somebody that I like. But yeah, it's been not exactly the start to the season that I'd hoped for, even though the sacks have been there in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's early in his career. Maybe we got a bit greedy, or I certainly did after what I saw in his rookie year. So, this is this year 3, year 4? I can't remember. But yeah, he's got a long way to go yet as a player, and he's got time to get there. And like you say, he's got a pretty significant role there for the Colts. 65% snap share. It's healthy. So looking forward to him coming back. Even though, as I say, I'm not quite ready to anoint him as anything too special, but I'm open-minded. You got to stay open-minded, haven't you?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is year 3 for him, so definitely still early, especially for like one of these like really super athletic guys. It takes a little bit of time for these guys to kind of hit their stride in the NFL. How about on Jacksonville? Because Chad Muma is somebody I think worth talking about, and Devin Lloyd as well. Because these guys, this has just been an interesting situation. Obviously, Devin Lloyd didn't travel to London, so he missed the last 2 games, and Chad Muma played in his stead. But Muma kind of lost snaps on his own this past week without Devin Lloyd in the rotation, and he just hasn't been good, right? So it's not really surprising that they've kind of limited him a little bit more, and they haven't had the other option to go to. So he still played 83%, but he's been the second lowest graded defensive player on the team in both weeks as a starter now, with a 46.3 and a 38.1. That puts him at a 35.2 defensive grade for the year, which ranks 84th out of 85 linebackers. So not good for Chad Muma. I have to think that they'll go back to Devin Lloyd now that the London trip is done, and that he should be back from that. What was it, a hand injury or a thumb injury or something like that? It wasn't like anything major. So I have Devin Lloyd a lot higher than Chad Muma this week. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, exactly the same, John. I really agree with your assessment there. Yeah, I mean, I kind of hoped Muma would really take advantage of Lloyd's absence in this 2-game stretch, because Lloyd hasn't been that good himself, and that Muma might take a giant leap from year 1. But I was getting too far ahead of myself. He's been really, really underwhelming, hasn't he? Both in terms of production and performance. Like you say, he didn't play near to the amount of snaps he played in the week before. I forget how much of a drop off it was, like 15%, 17, 20%, something like that. It was interesting to note that they gave Antonio Johnson a couple of snaps, or more. I think it was the difference between how many snaps Muma had played the week before and last week was how many snaps they gave to Antonio Johnson. So yeah, that's an interesting one to watch. But like you say, he lost snaps on his own. I mean, I see Lloyd was back at practice today, so, he's no world beater himself. But like you say, you've got to think that he's going to assume that role again, purely because Muma's been so poor.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then the other thing with Jacksonville that I wanted to put on here is Josh Allen. I'm still a big believer in Josh Allen, their edge rusher there. Still a top edge option for me. I think I have him as edge 7. Didn't get a sack last week, or at least not one that counted. He did have a sack called back by like a BS roughing the passer penalty, whatever. Well, he did kind of run into him, helmet to helmet there. But I still like Josh Allen quite a bit. He has that big blow up potential, as we've already seen a couple times this year. So he's still one of my top options going forward.
Yeah, I've kind of gone to bat for Allen in recent weeks. I think he's shown steady progression in the last 3 years. The sack numbers don't always show it compared to where he was. Was it his rookie year? He had 12.
Right. Yeah.
But the pressure rate is up. The tackle numbers are also up if you score those in your fantasy leagues. Yeah, he's been a bit streaky this year, but he probably won fantasy matchups on his own in those 2-3 sack games against the Colts and the Falcons. Now, after talking him up in general as a player, I have to say that his matchup isn't stellar this week. The Colts O-line has a pair of pretty decent tackles in Bernard Raymond and Braden Smith, and it's Raymond who Allen will face more of this week. I feel like Allen's matchup against the Colts is kind of coming a week too late, as Raymond's replacement in the last 2 weeks, whose name I completely forget, he's been pretty damn poor. But unfortunately for Allen and his fantasy managers, Raymond looks like he might be back from the concussion that he suffered, because he was in practice today, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind there. Yeah. Not the best matchup for him. It's just more that we kind of trust the talent there with him, right? So he seems like, the kind of player that you can leave in lineups here. And then obviously you don't want to bench him with that sack potential that he's been hitting on early this season. Anything else for this game, or you want to move to Carolina, Miami?
Yeah, let's move on to the Panthers and the Dolphins. It's going to be an interesting matchup. I think there's a fair few things to talk about in that one. The first point, I want to talk about Brian Burns for a minute. So he's a good player, I feel, and he's been productive, in the last 3 years, and this year is no exception. He's made a lot of fantasy managers very happy with 5 sacks in 5 games, but he's managed that despite producing only 13 pressures. And that's a concern for me, as is the fact that he's not really improved much in the last few years. It might raise some eyebrows, but I'm beginning to wonder if we've seen his ceiling. I wonder if you think he's a trade candidate at this point, as someone who might see a drop off in production because he's produced a high volume of sacks so far, but a relatively low number of pressures. Where are you at on him?
Yeah, like I like Brian Burns, but I don't love Brian Burns, if that makes sense. And it's the exact reasons that you talked about. Like the pass rush metrics haven't really been there for him as much as they have for like some of his peers that get drafted in that same kind of range. He seems to always kind of get drafted a little bit higher than everybody else. I think people believe in the potential for him, but the metrics really haven't been there as much, not at least compared to like the guy that we just talked about, even Josh Allen, right? So he's just found ways to be productive with the sacks, right? And there's always the chance that those can regress too, but I do kind of think he is like a prime trade candidate, right? The Panthers are now 0-5 on the year. Obviously not playing for this season. They got Bryce Young at quarterback, so there's potential for the future, but I think there's a chance that Brian Burns is one of the bigger defensive players that could get traded this season. I think the trade deadline is October 31st. So a couple of teams that I was thinking of, the Baltimore Ravens definitely need edge help. There's nobody really there. Always been dealing with injuries. Everybody else dealing with injuries. And then the Kansas City Chiefs obviously are one that's always going to come up because it's Mike Dana and like George Karlaftis over there. So not world beaters in their own right. Karlaftis, a former first round pick, I think pairing him with a Brian Burns, I mean, that just puts that team at another level as well now as far as pass rushing goes. So those are the two teams that kind of came to mind for me for Brian Burns as a potential trade candidate.
Yeah, I like it. I can definitely see Baltimore being in play, like you say. Two pretty unproven guys in Ajabo and Away, and like you say, just really suffering with with injuries. I wonder about the Bears as well. You know, I don't know what their cap situation is like. I know it's looking pretty healthy in 2024, but they have a pretty stagnant pass rush and could really do with some help on that side of the ball. You know, we're not saying Burns is elite or anything like that, but he'd be a huge upgrade over anything else they've got, and their pass rush is dire.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. Yeah, Chicago definitely needs some help there. That'll be interesting if they do go after Brian Burns. Another guy in Carolina, though, that at least Panthers fans were clamoring to be traded at this past weekend. The Panthers fans found my tweet that Jeremy Chin played just 18 snaps in week 5, and the consensus was that he should be traded if they're not going to utilize him. And this is kind of crazy to me. They're really just not using Jeremy Chin at all. He's played pretty much, you know, a nickel corner role, and it hasn't been nearly a full-time corner role either. So that is concerning. I just somebody to bring up again that we're not starting him in IDP leagues, right?
Most definitely not. No, I mean, for a guy who was supposed to be one of the core components of that defense, or you know, he was one of the core components of that defense. Last season, his snap share has just been really crappy. Saw a slight uptick after Xavier Woods went down, but last week was a new low. I think he had, like you said, like 30% snap share. Von Bell and Sam Franklin are the better options for now, and Woods will be back at some point to make matters even worse for Chin. I've just got no interest in him on a weekly basis or in redraft unless a trade does come about, and I can definitely see that happening. If they're not going to use him, he's one of those guys that someone will kind of want and make. They'll think they can get more out of him perhaps than the Panthers have managed to do so far. So yeah, hold on to him in Dynasty. Don't play him in weekly or in redraft. It's probably worth even holding on to him in redraft, actually, thinking about it, until you know whether or not a trade comes about. But that's what, 20 days away, 3 weeks away? It's a long time to tie up a roster spot. So it depends on the depth of your league, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I think, league size definitely matters here. Otherwise, he's been pretty much droppable. But anything else for the Panthers that is worth talking about here?
Yeah, KGH, Grugier Hill, it feels like he's been a bit unfortunate to be banged up at the wrong time. The opportunity's kind of been there in the absence of Shaq Thompson. I did know he's not listed on the injury report after missing part of last week's game. But I'm not really ready to give him the benefit of the doubt just yet, because the Panthers don't seem to want to do that. They kind of pivoted to Deion Jones for a game and then came back to KGH. So I think let's see him establish a full-time role alongside Luvu before we get too invested in starting him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not starting KGH. And then you even got Chandler Wooten working his way in there and playing over him. So there's not a lot of hope for Grugier Hill. This week, we'll see what happens with that snap share. But there's no chance that I'm playing Grugier Hill this week. On the Miami side of things, I feel like we've been asking for this the past few weeks, but we have to get Jalen Phillips back now, right? It's been a few weeks. We've only seen one full game of Jalen Phillips so far this year. He got banged up in week 3, so didn't play a lot. And it was a good week 1 that he had, right? But we haven't seen him for the past few weeks. And this is a great matchup against the Panthers, who ranked 28th in pass blocking grade. They got Bryce Young, who's taken 12 sacks on the year. It's just hopeful that Jalen Phillips can get out there with that oblique injury. I have no idea how long an oblique actually takes to heal. Do you have any idea how long an oblique takes to heal?
I don't know. I can't. I'm out of shape, John. I can't even feel my obliques. I think they're here, right?
Somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this Jalen Phillips situation is been super annoying, hasn't it? I think he was one of the guys that we talked about in that breakout pod that we did before the season started, and I was really excited to see him build on that really impressive year he had in 2022. And I'm sure when he gets back to full health, he'll remind us all of the player he is and what we've been missing. But yeah, I mean, look, in the meantime, let's just enjoy the Andrew Van Ginkel show, right? He's performed beyond my expectations so far.
Definitely. Yeah. If for whatever reason Phillips can't go again, then you can plug in Andrew Van Ginkel. He's been awesome. So I have Van Ginkel as edge 30 this week, but if Phillips isn't playing, then I'm moving him up that rankings quite a bit. So something to keep an eye on there. And then the other thing to keep an eye on is, again, the Miami linebackers. This, again, seems dependent on if Jalen Phillips is playing. If he is, then it might push Van Ginkel to more of an off-ball linebacker role, which would probably push David Long down the depth chart again, because Jerome Baker took back the LB1 role last week after losing it in week 4, I guess it was. So just another kind of messy situation, but not players that you're overly excited about for IDP. But unless they're getting these full-time roles, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little more unsettled than we'd like it to be at this point, because, as you say, they kind of flip-flopped between Baker and Long for a couple of weeks there. I was surprised to see Long outsnap Baker in week 4, and I don't know the reason for that. I didn't see any injury news. I didn't see Baker get injured in the game. No. So that just leaves me with this sort of nagging doubt that they're not 100% committed to Baker being the every down guy going forward. Again, if I've got to choose between them, I'm with you. I'd go with Baker. But yeah, I need to see it happen for a couple of weeks before I've got full confidence in that going forward. I mean, it's not a situation I'm too invested in personally. I don't really love either player as a fantasy performer, but for those who have them on their rosters, yeah, Baker looks like the guy, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems that'll be the way it goes, especially when Phillips comes back and Van Ginkel starts working in there. But yeah, hopefully you got better options either way. So let's move on to New England and Las Vegas. And we'll start with the Patriots edge defenders here, because Matthew Judon, as we know, did suffer the injury. What was it, a bicep or something like that? So he's going to be out for a while now and not returning. So we talked about this last week. We didn't think that it was necessarily going to be one player that steps up and replaces Matthew Judon, but more of a committee of players, just based on how Belichick has deployed this defense in the past. And that was kind of the case here in week 5. When you look at the snap share breakdown, Dietrich Wise, 64%, Anthony Jennings, 64%, but Keon White worked in there at 54%, Josh Uche, 50%. So everybody got some time there on the edge. Decent snap shares, but not things that are like not overly optimistic about those being enough to get us consistent IDP production. So I am not overly excited about the Patriots edge defenders.
Yeah, I was kind of interested to see Josh Uche have a larger role. He's been so productive in terms of pressures and sacks, considering the relatively small role he had last year and to start this season. He did very little last week, but then none of the Pats edge rushers did anything really. So not marking him down too much for that. But yeah, I mean, his pressure rate last year was right up there with the best of them. He just didn't have the snap volume, and he started off really strongly again this season, despite, as I say, playing like 30% or so of the snaps. I was talking about him on a pod last week, and I think on any other team where you've got an edge rusher who's been productive, really productive, I think he had double-digit tackles last year, despite barely playing, he'd probably be rewarded with a bigger role. But this is the Pats, and they just went out and got Keon White to add to the mix. So yeah, still low-key excited maybe about what Uche could do with a bigger role, but I'm not expecting huge things. He was more of a add him to your rosters and just wait and see how this looks in terms of the division of snaps. And we're starting to get a feel for that now, and it's not wonderful.
Yeah, Belichick seems to be very kind of scheme specific for a lot of his defensive players, offensive as well, really. And it just seems like he views Uche as more of like a pass rush specialist more than anything, and might not trust him on those early downs. But we at least hope for more pass rush opportunities here with Matthew Judon, and maybe it's still early with Judon out of the lineup, so they could potentially see that role grow, because, like you said, he's been effective as a pass rusher. So it's just a matter of seeing more snaps for him to trust him on a weekly basis. I guess the safeties, Kyle Duggar was the only other player I think of interest to me here for the Patriots. Still getting strong usage. Just 6 tackles last week, so nothing crazy, but didn't play 100% of snaps either. But there was garbage time in this game where Belichick pulled the starters. But really nice usage for Kyle Duggar, 42% in the box. We talked about it last week as well. We don't mind if he's playing 90% of snaps instead of 100, as long as those snaps now go towards him playing more in the box, which is what we're seeing. And coming off a 15 tackle game the week before as well. So I think there's definitely a lot still to like about Kyle Duggar.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like you say, he hasn't been playing every down for the last 2 weeks, but there's reasons for that. The Pats have been blown out in both games, haven't they? So, not too concerned with that. Still on board with him. Interesting to see what he could do when he gets 100% of the snaps, because he's already doing pretty well with what he's getting. And it's like you say, it's not a huge drop off anyway.
Yeah. I love Kyle Duggar. I just think he's got such high potential for IDP, and I have him as safety 8 this week. So, how about on the Raiders side? I mean, Max Crosby, I put him in here just because this is the second week in a row now that he's played 100% of defensive snaps. He is just an absolute animal. He hasn't missed a snap in 2 weeks. He added a sack last week as well. He's one of the league leaders in pressures, pass rush grade, all of that fun stuff. He's my edge 1 this week. Just continue to hopefully stay healthy and play on the field, because this guy he's been unbelievable this year. One of the most valuable players, because you just don't get an edge defender that plays that many snaps every single week.
No, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 that get a really high number of snaps or a really high snap share, but neither of them play 100%.
Right.
Max is crazy. Mad Max. He's one of those guys you never drop again, irrespective of his matchup. It's nice to see. I saw that the tackle efficiency is right up there with where it was last year. Last year, we saw that big jump in tackle efficiency as well. And it feels odd to talk about this where we're talking about a guy who's such a good edge rusher in terms of producing pressures and sacks, but we already know that about him by now. But the tackle efficiency really buoyed his value, I think, last year, and he did, as I say, take a big jump from the year before. And this year, it's right there again. In fact, I think it might be slightly better. So that's really nice to see. He's also my edge 1 for the week. I believe he plays the majority of his snaps on the left side of that defensive line, which puts him up against Vidarian Lowe, I think his name is, who I talked about a little bit last week as one of the worst pass blockers the worst pass blocker on that Patriots line. So it's a really good matchup for a really good player who's in really good form. What's not to like?
Yeah, you just love Max Crosby. Yeah, locked in there. We hope he'll have another massive game this week. Other thing with the Raiders, again, Divine Diablo did not play a full-time role. That's gone to Robert Spillane. I don't know. I got Diablo as LB 45 this week. Spillane is LB 22. Spillane, he had a decent tackle game, obviously boosted by 2 interceptions, which definitely helps his case there on Monday Night Football. But I'm going to assume you're feeling about similar with the Raiders linebackers given the snap share.
Yeah, I've got them ranked pretty similarly. I've got Diablo down at 38 and Spillane at 25. Diablo might be the more exciting player. He's certainly got the better name, right? And outside of Spillane's pair of interceptions last week, there's very little to choose between them in terms of production. But if the division of snaps continues in the way that we've seen so far through the first 5 games, it would be a surprise if Spillane didn't finish above Diablo this year. So for that reason, I'm leaning more towards Spillane than Diablo most weeks.
Yeah. I think even though the tackle production, like you said, it's been fairly close, you do expect that over time with more snaps, that just creates more opportunity, right? So let's go to the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. Where do you want to start with these 2 teams?
Well, I don't really want to start with Zaven Collins, but I'm going to anyway. I mean, The good news, he's got 3 sacks in 5 games, which is more than we expected for an edge convert when we heard about him playing time at that position. And if nobody talked about, or if nobody knew the underlying metrics, they'd say, that would be a massive success. But the bad news is he's produced only 5 pressures on 92 pass rush attempts. So yeah, I mean, good luck if you're expecting that sack production to continue. He has improved slightly, to give him his dues. He has improved slightly from where he started in week 1. So there is some hope that if he can continue to get better, then he could become a viable fantasy starter. But I'm just not sold. I think there's far better options, even against the Rams and their dodgy offensive line this week in week 6.
Yeah, it's been nice that the pass rush grade, like you said, it's slightly increased every week, but it's still not great, right? See, he posted a season high this past week, 63.3, just an 8% win rate and pressure rate. Did land a sack, like you said, but this is a guy I just continue not to be that interested in. There's too many good edge rushers out there. He's really kind of fallen into a lot of his production early this season. I don't expect it to continue as long as he continues to play the same way. So just kind of fading Zaven Collins, even against the Rams here. And like you said, they're not a great pass blocking unit, but I just don't have a lot of confidence in Zaven Collins.
No.
How about their linebackers? Josh Woods came back last week. Kaiser White, we know, is their LB1 there. They've had a mix of like Chris Barnes and Ezekiel Turner, but Josh Woods came back to the starting lineup, played 83% of snaps. Interestingly enough, he's the only linebacker in the league grading lower than Chad Muma this season. So we'll see how long he lasts in the starting lineup. But how do you feel about Josh Woods if he's playing around 83% of snaps?
Yeah, I mean, if he can maintain that sort of snap share on an ongoing basis, then to steal your phrase, really, he's gonna fall into production. You have to, really. That's a pretty healthy snap share. Still places him outside the top 40 linebackers for me, especially because, as you pointed out, he's really not a great player. He hasn't shown it so far, at least. He didn't do much with the opportunity last week, but he'll have better weeks if he continues to see that kind of usage. I kind of feel like if Kaiser White would slow down a little bit and allow Woods to make the tackle, make the play, then that would be a good thing for Woods. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm not huge on Woods, but yeah, like you say, the volume is there, the snap volume is there, and that's the most important thing for now.
Yeah. This is he's just not been great, but yeah, Kaiser White's been awesome. The only other thing really from this game, the Rams defense really isn't overly interesting, but Aaron Donald, I just want to point out, like, we took a moment to kind of gas him up last week. We talked about him being all the way back. He was amazing. DT1 leading the position in pass rush grade and pressures and all of that fun stuff. Well, he followed that up with the lowest pass rush grade of his entire career in week 5 with a 48.9. Not something that I'm concerned about going forward, but it was more just like a dud game that happens. And it was against a really good offensive line in the Eagles. But I do think he'll be back. I just thought it was funny that we took the time to kind of talk about how Aaron Donald was back and he was amazing. And then he goes ahead and posts literally the lowest pass rush grade of his entire career. So hopefully he bounces back this week.
Oh, hey man, I did something similar, but in the opposite direction. I was talking down Ed Oliver a little bit on a show, and yeah, you saw what he did last week. I mean, yeah, I was going to say I don't remember Donald having a game as quiet as he did last week, but yeah, he was playing against the Eagles, and that offensive line is one of the best, if not the best, in the league. I think, even though I think they were missing someone. Who were they missing? There's Cam Jurgens, I think it was, and they had to bring in another guy to replace him, whose name I definitely won't remember. But yeah, I'm not concerned either, John. You know, outside of that one game, Donald's been as good as he ever was, and I think he gets back on track this week. Josh Dobbs hasn't been sacked a ton
Mhm.
But the interior of that offensive line is the weak point, and I think Donald could take advantage of that. He's going to be able to prove a point this week after what he did do or didn't do last week.
Yeah, I hope so. I still have him as, I think, DT2 this week behind only Chris Jones. So have faith that Aaron Donald will bounce back. Let's talk about the Eagles and the Jets here. So where do you want to start with Eagles Jets?
Yeah, Hassan Reddick. The sheer joy and relief on his face as he celebrated one of his sacks was nice to see. It was palpable, wasn't it? He looked. He was clearly aware of the pressure I felt after suggesting to someone on Twitter that they should hold tight and wait for Reddick to produce. So yeah, I appreciate that, Hassan. Thank you, buddy. But yeah, he's starting to gather some steam, isn't he? He's starting to find his feet a little bit and starting to produce in the way that we've grown used to over the years. So yeah, I mean, long may it continue. I'm looking forward to him continuing the good form that he's shown in the last 2 games.
Yeah, me too. I mean, he had those 2 clutch sacks near the end of the game. It was like on 3rd and 4th down consecutively as well. Another good matchup this week against Zach Wilson and the Jets. The Jets are likely to turn to Max Mitchell at right tackle after placing Elijah Vera Tucker on injured reserve this week. Mitchell has played 19 pass blocking snaps and has managed just a 34.2 pass blocking grade, which is the lowest on the team. Zach Wilson also ranks inside the top 10 most sacked quarterbacks this season with 14. So I imagine that Hassan Reddick should be able to keep it going. I think I have him as edge 10 this week.
Yeah, I like it. And they obviously lost Dwayne Brown earlier in the year as well, didn't they? So they're really hurting at the position, I think. So yeah, Reddick in the form he's in the most recent games. Yeah, I can see him having a good game here.
Nice. The other thing too, Nakobe Dean is eligible to return off IR this week for the Eagles. I guess the question is, how does this linebacker room kind of shake out with Nakobe Dean back in the lineup, right? Because before Dean got hurt, it was him as the LB1, Zach Cunningham as kind of the secondary player there. And then Nicholas Morrow came in to fill in for Dean and took over as the LB1. Zach Cunningham did not move from his LB2 spot on the depth chart. So I wonder, is this a situation, do you feel like that's like similar to Kansas City where they view these guys in specific roles and Nicholas Morrow is a direct replacement of Nakobe Dean, similar to Drew Tranquill and Nick Bolton, and Zach Cunningham stays in that LB2 role? Or do you think this is a chance where Nakobe Dean just pushes each guy down the depth chart? Morrow goes to LB2, Cunningham to LB3, or is it possible that Dean is LB3 being eased back into this week?
Too many choices, John. I can't remember.
I know. I just realized I was rambling with choices. It's a lot to think about.
No, hey man, I think option 1. I think they view them in very specific roles. There's no justification for why they would drop Morrow to the practice squad before the year and then bring him back up and then make him the LB1. Otherwise, I feel so. Yeah, I think he's been productive at times in recent games, more so than Cunningham maybe. But yeah, I feel like he's the guy who gets hurt the most with Dean coming back. That said, I mean, I don't think either guy is irreplaceable. So I wouldn't be. Right. I'm sitting on the fence a little bit with this one, but purely because I'd rather just say I don't know for sure when I don't know for sure, and this is one of those situations. So yeah, that's the big question. What happens to the rest of them when Dean gets back? Time will tell. But my hunch is Morrow hurts the most.
That's exactly the way I've leaned as well. I have Morrow and Cunningham super close, but I do have Cunningham ahead of Morrow this week. And that's assuming that Nakobe Dean plays. But like I said before, there's also the chance that they ease Nakobe Dean back in and he doesn't step right back into that LB1 role. But assuming that he is, then I have Dean the highest, Cunningham second, and then Morrow third. So,
yeah. I mean, he's eligible to return. Have you seen whether or not he's practiced yet? I haven't seen any news on that.
I think they've opened the practice window. That's the only thing I've seen. I haven't seen that he's actually been on the practice field. So that would be the one thing to kind of look for, I guess, today, because today's Wednesday. So we should be able to get some detailed practice reports today, tomorrow, and Friday. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about if you don't mind talking about Quincy Williams on the Jets? I love that guy. I don't
Awesome.
really have sort of my guys outside of maybe Derwin James. We'll get to later, but if I did, I think Williams might be one of them. Five games again is a small sample size, but he looks so much better this year than he ever has in the past, and the production is there too. I'm all in on Quincy Williams.
I'm with you. I love Quincy Williams. I mean, I had him as LB15 in the ranks last week, and I talked about how I was going to have a hard time moving him down from that range. He added 2 sacks to his stats that week, and I moved him up. I moved him to LB11. So he had another 100% snap share game. This is just exactly what you're hoping for from your linebackers, and it hasn't hurt CJ Mosley either because he's been super efficient as well. So both of those guys have been great for IDP. So you love to see that. We appreciate the Jets giving us 2 full-time linebackers.
It's really kind of a minute.
It is. Yeah, it's nice. It gives us more options, which we always want. How about Quincy's brother, Quinnen? Because, again, still been quiet this year. Just a half sack on the year. He's played relatively well, like not up to like peak Quinnen Williams from what we've seen, but just a slow start to the year is the way I feel like it's been. But are you panicked at all about Quinnen Williams, I guess, after, what has it been, 5 weeks?
Not really. I mean, he's getting close, right? He's not. It's not like he's playing poorly. He ranks 4th amongst all interior defensive linemen in pressures. He's got 16 hurries and 4 QB hits, so he's not a million miles away. It's just again this matchup with the Eagles. We talked about Aaron Donald a minute ago and how he was kind of stonewalled by this unit, and you've got to wonder whether a similar thing will happen to Quinnen Williams as well this week. So not too concerned about the player. I think he'll definitely start to get there, and we'll be talking about him in the same way as we're talking about Reddick. Slow start, but he's come good. Again, just not sure this is the week for him against that Eagles offensive line.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair for sure. Hopefully he gets back on track, but it's definitely going to be a tougher matchup to do that. Let's go on to the Detroit Lions at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I guess we'll start with the Lions, right? Anybody on the Lions that you want to call out specifically?
Hey, Aiden Hutchinson. We can't not talk about Aiden Hutchinson, can we? No. He's just been incredible. No fewer than 6 pressures in every game so far this year. And the big plays and the sacks have started to come. In his last 3, he's got 4, I believe, a forced fumble and an interception, of course. His matchup isn't the easiest this week because the Bucs offensive tackles are pretty good, but it helps that Hutch plays most of his time on the left edge, meaning he'll spend more time going up against Luke Gadecki than he will against Tristan Wirfs. Gadecki's really stepped up his game in his second season, but it's not every week that he faces a guy as talented as Hutchinson. I spent a lot of the season talking about what I call the big 5 at the edge rusher position. So obviously Parsons, Garrett, Bosa, TJ Watt, and Mad Max. Is it too early, do you think, to expand that to 6 to include Hutchinson? Am I jumping the gun a little bit?
Honestly, I don't think it is, because I had him as edge 5 last week. I put him in edge 5 again. TJ Watt's on a bye week, so TJ Watt would be in there. I can't imagine myself moving Aiden Hutchinson down at this point. He's been that good. And yeah, I'm with you. I think that edge 6, the top 6, is very fair to include him in there. Just everything is there for him, right? The snap share is there. He played up 86% of snaps last week. The pass rush metrics are there. 88 pass rush grade, 24% win rate. Like you said, all those pressures, 35 pressures, leads the NFL. There's just too much to love about Aiden Hutchinson. I have a hard time moving him out of those top 5, top 6. And I know it's a tougher matchup this week. And Baker Mayfield is second to only Patrick Mahomes in pressure to sack conversion rate. So there's that to kind of keep in mind there. But he's just been so good. If anybody could do it, you kind of have to bank on Aiden Hutchinson to kind of come through here. And like you said, he's got a more favorable matchup than facing Tristan Wirfs, but everything's there for him. I can't move him out of the top 5 at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you, right there with you. I had him as my edge 3 last week, and I've got him as my edge 3 again this week. I've
Nice.
not moved him
Beautiful.
from that spot. So yeah, I love the guy. It's been great to see. We kind of hoped it would be this way after what we saw in his rookie year. A little bit more up and down, as you'd imagine a rookie to be at that position. But yeah, this year so far, it's been incredible. Love it. I
Yeah.
love watching him play. It's
So fun.
it's wonderful.
Yeah. Something that isn't as fun is the
Yeah,
Lions linebackers, right?
I thought you'd go there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just man. I don't know. I'll let you start us off. Well, how you I guess approaching this group here, because obviously we're excited about Jack Campbell, but this has not been the case so far.
No, I just want Alex Anzalone to just go away. I really do. I mean, you've got some sway in this industry, John. Can you pull some strings and just get him gone?
I've been beating the dump Alex Anzalone drum for a long time, and then nobody listens. So I don't think I can do anything at this point.
I mean, this guy, he ruined the emergence of Malcolm Rodriguez for me last year. He's doing the same for Jack Campbell this year. I mean, I get it. He had a good game against the Panthers himself, and he's actually playing better, isn't he, than he has in the last few games. He's playing better than he did in the past. But I'm just really impatient, and I really want to see more of Jack Campbell. I mean, unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to try and stay patient. And as even Derek Barnes is seeing more time than Campbell at this point, and that's just depressing to think about.
It is. It's such a weird situation because even with no Malcolm Rodriguez last week, they relegated Malcolm Rodriguez to special teams only in week 5, which is wild. And Jack Campbell's played a smaller snap share last week than the previous 2 weeks at just 44%. So it just doesn't seem likely that he's going to take over for Alex Anzalone this year. Even that LB2 spot is feeling like a stretch at this point with Derek Barnes in there. So very disappointing stuff from the Lions in that regard. But yeah, this is what Dan Campbell's done with his first rounders, right? Jameer Gibbs, Jameson Williams, those guys have all been limited so far in their career too. So we'll see. Maybe year 2 is the year for Jack Campbell. We will have to find out. But anything else in this game? I didn't put anything for the Bucs, but if you have anything that you want to talk about for the Bucs, I feel like they're the most bland defense in the league, just as far as we kind of know what to expect from them. They're a good defense, but I feel like there's no surprises there, I guess.
No, not really. I mean, I was again, this is a point I wasn't really planning on talking about, but I'm just realizing we haven't really talked about them. I feel a bit we should give those Bucs fans or the fancy managers who have some Bucs on their squad something. Yeah, Shaq Barrett. He's a guy I was talking up a little bit this off season. I was hopeful that he would be able to return from injury and play even close to the same level that he has in the past. I know he's not young anymore, but what I saw in the preseason kind of gave me some hope, some optimism that he was further along in his recovery from injury than others thought he might be. Obviously, he's had a lot of things to deal with off field, and obviously your heart goes out to him for those. Feels a little bizarre to be talking about fantasy stuff on the back of some of that, but yeah, I mean, he's been relatively ineffective. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka also relatively ineffective, but I'm kind of lower on him, or have been lower on him than others. So just needs someone to step up really there for the Bucs.
Yeah. It's been nice to see at least Barrett get back on the field, especially coming off that Achilles injury too. Like that's a tough one to recover from. And he's been out there since even the preseason, which is encouraging. 79.4 pass rush grade on the year. So not bad. 11 pressures, but yeah, it just hasn't been the production that we've hoped for, at least in the box score, right? So he's playing enough snaps that hopefully that'll come with some positive matchups. But I think that's what you're maybe looking for more so than anything with Barrett, is like plus matchups to kind of plug him into lineups or stream him at this point in his career.
Yeah, I didn't know his pass rush grade was that high. Actually, over at PFF, sometimes doesn't really appear that way when I watch him play. But I guess
Yeah.
the bye doesn't help in terms of the production. We kind of forget about that.
Yeah.
He's had one fewer game than everybody else out there, or most other guys out there. So we have to take that into account. But I'm kind of pulling for him. I really
Yeah,
want
me
him
too.
to come back around to where he was, or as I say, even partway back to where he was. That'd be lovely to see.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I think the pass rush grade too propped up a little bit by a week 2 game against the Bears, which he had like a 93 in that game. So that definitely helped him
Okay.
as well. But um,
Yeah.
all right, let's go to Sunday Night Football here. We get the Giants again in prime time. Lucky us. They are facing off against the Buffalo Bills. Let's start with Isaiah Simmons, okay? Because this was surprising to me. I did not expect this
You
at
and me
all.
both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was great. He played 100% of snaps in week 5, and now there was no Micah McFadden in that game, but there was really no sign that there would be another linebacker to play 100% of snaps in Wink Martindale's defense. McFadden hadn't been a full-time player or even close to it. Simmons was averaging 27% of defensive snaps prior to this week. So this kind of came out of nowhere. He had a really productive game. I don't know that anybody was starting him and benefited from that. If you did, congratulations. And I'd love to see how and why that happened. But I think there's the chance at least that Micah McFadden comes back this week, which would probably drop Isaiah Simmons down the depth chart again. I don't know. How do you feel about this Giants linebacker core now that they have this wrench thrown into things?
Yeah, I'm not drawing anything too conclusive from from what happened last week with Simmons. I know it's not what some people will want to hear. There was a lot of hype about him when the Giants traded for him.
Right.
I couldn't really understand why, based on what we've seen from him. But yeah, he's got his fans clearly. But there's a reason why the Giants have trusted a 2022 fifth round pick and one who hasn't been playing well at all over Simmons until he got injured, right? So I get it. Things can change, and who knows? Maybe Simmons stakes a claim for a bigger role, even when McFadden does return. Now I saw McFadden didn't participate in practice today, so if he doesn't go, then Simmons could be a starter for a second week. And yeah, he gets another opportunity to prove that he deserves more playing time. But yeah, don't jump the gun on this one. I'm not going to start him unless McFadden is out again.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think you kind of avoid that situation if they're all playing and just kind of see how it shakes out. But the only other thing with the Giants was Kayvon Thibodeau. So he's been productive, 4 sacks in the past 3 games. But the pass rush metrics have been pretty poor. 59.1 pass rush grade. He's really been a product of volume at this point, right? He's had some strong matchups. So that's been a big help for him in landing those sacks, because 59.1 pass rush grade. He had a 3% win rate last game, which is really, really poor. Not a great matchup for him this week. Josh Allen and the Bills. Allen has the 8th best pressure to sack conversion rate in the league at 15%. The Bills are 6th in pass blocking grade. I have Thibodeau outside of my top 24 edge defenders this week. I'm not banking on that production kind of continuing this week, just by looking at some of those underlying metrics being pretty concerning.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I've got him as my my edge 19 this week. But I'm not as high on him, and I've been saying this since the start of the season, as some others are. Doesn't mean I hate him. Doesn't mean I don't like him even. I know he's crazy talented. We saw him flash at times last year, and I understand the level of excitement. But yeah, the sack numbers, they have been there in the last 3 games, but like you say, 10 pressures in 5 games is really poor. I don't have the answer to whether or not that's sustainable going forward, that sack rate that he's been producing, but it does concern me a little more than it seems to concern other people. So yeah, I'm far from sold on Thibodeau. It's super early in his career, and I'm sure he'll come good, but yeah, maybe not for this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then on the other side of things, the Bills linebackers, we know Matt Milano out for the season. This was a major bummer, obviously. So Terrell Bernard still remains the every down player, but I thought it was interesting because we did see Dorian Williams play the entire rest of the first quarter after Milano went down. So he was the every down player next to Bernard. But then the rest of the game was not the same. Tyrell Dodson came in and took over as that LB2 for the Bills, but he wasn't full time in that role either. So it was kind of rotated in and out with Dorian Williams as well. So it wasn't necessarily that there was a specific next man up for them, but if you had to choose somebody for this week between Tyrell Dodson and Dorian Williams, I'm going Tyrell Dodson, but I'm not like overly confident enough about him to lock him into where I had Bernard and Milano in previous rankings. So I have him as LB 46 this week, but I would choose Dotson over Dorian Williams. How about you?
Yeah, right there with you again. I've got him as LB 41 Dodson this week, and I've got Williams outside of my top 50. I'm probably more excited about Williams, but I feel like it's been a week that they've had to prepare for life post Milano. Yeah. So I feel like they'll go to what they know, and maybe ease Williams in over time is what I see happening. That seems to make more sense to me. Yeah. It's kind of nice that Dodson gets another shot, I think, after losing out to Bernard for that LB2 role earlier in, it was actually the preseason, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, definitely keeping an eye on Williams, but Dodson seems to make more sense for the time being. I'm kind of hoping it's not a combination of both of them, as we saw last week, because that would mean one less viable starting option at linebacker, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be definitely a bummer if they do that deployment that we saw in the second to fourth quarter last week. But hopefully we get two full-time players there, but we do want to kind of wait and see what it looks like to be sure. But yeah, hopefully it'll be Tyrell Dodson. But I still like Dorian Williams too, like you said, long-term. All right, let's go to our last game here, Monday Night Football. It is the Dallas Cowboys and the Los Angeles Chargers. We got Charger stuff repping behind us. You got the LaDainian Tomlinson jersey. I got the Derwin James jersey back there. I think you have a Derwin shirt on. Is that right?
Yeah, it's last year's number. But
there you go. Yeah, that's the same thing with this jersey back. But so let's start. Let's start with the Chargers then, because we're talking about them. Which part of the Chargers, I guess, do we start with here is the question.
Right, let's start with Derwin. Yes. I mean, obviously we both love the guy. It's been really crappy to see him sort of banged up once again. This time with a hamstring injury. I see he practiced on Tuesday though, so I am hopeful he can return against the Cowboys this week, and that will be a pretty nice matchup for him as well. Given what the Cowboys have given up to safeties in previous games, that, and more than anything, really, that Chargers defense could really do with getting him back. He's really the only game changer they have in that secondary, the captain and leader of the defense. Mm-hmm. And you've got to think that Dak and Co are eager to set the record straight after that humbling loss to the 49ers. So they'll be out to prove a point. So yeah, the Chargers need James. I need James. You need James. All fantasy managers need James. Willing him to come back this week.
Yeah. The bye week came at a nice time because I'm sure he would have missed the game with that hamstring injury for sure. Mm-hmm. And yeah, hopefully he'll be back this week. He stays in my safety one spot in the rankings. I never change him. We do that for the brand over here. So he is in that spot right now until he is ruled out. Hopefully he's not though. So the other guy dealing with a hamstring injury is Joey Bosa as well. We've seen him limited in weeks 2 and 3. He didn't play at all in week 4. So he's another one to kind of monitor going forward. Obviously, if he's healthy, you're probably playing him because even on limited snaps, the guy is still one of the best pass rushers in the league and has the potential to put up numbers. But how about the Chargers linebackers? So last week, or the week that they played before their bye week, Eric Kendricks did return to the lineup, but he wasn't a full-time player. That, again, maybe another case where they were easing him back in from injury, and now he's had the bye week to recover as well. So how do you feel about how this linebacker group is going to be deployed now after the bye?
Yeah, like you say, I think they were easing Kendricks back in again. Maybe they had some kind of renewed confidence in Murray because he was, I won't say good, but he was impactful
Right.
in Kendrick's absence. So
Yeah.
yeah, but let's not kid ourselves. We know who Murray is at this point, and he's not a guy any team should be handing 100% of the defensive snaps to. It's just he's just not that good.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident this is Kendrick's gig when he gets fully healthy. So I wouldn't be surprised if that snap share between the two flipped this week.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think I put Kendrick's LB 27, Kenneth Murray's LB 39. So I'm feeling like Kendrick should be back to that LB1 role again, but might be still some opportunity there for Kenneth Murray for those managers that do still have him. He did play 90% in week 1 when Kendrick was the full-time guy. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
How about for the Dallas Cowboys? Really, the only thing that I think is overly interesting here is Leighton Vander Esch injured his neck again. So this was a pretty big bummer. It seems like he's going to be out for a while, potentially the season. I think they may be cautious with him with that neck injury. But Damone Clark is the next man up. I have him not very high. I have him as LB 48. I'm just not as interested in this Cowboys defense, I guess, because it being such a man-heavy defense and involving the safeties so often as well, there's not a lot of tackle opportunity for the linebackers. They can be productive from time to time, but it's been sporadic at best, I've found. So I'll wait and see on Damone Clark, I guess, before moving him up on the rankings, and then not as interested in whoever emerges as the LB2 there, Marquise Bell or whoever.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really sad to see that happen to LVE, isn't it? I mean, that neck injury, like you say, is this the third time he's injured it now in the last three years. You just see it. It's sad to say, but it does make you wonder. I know this is a week 6 preview, but it does make you wonder if he's the long-term answer there in Dallas. And like you say, unfortunate though injuries may be, they do present an opportunity for other players, and in this case, it does look like it's going to be Damone Clark. The only thing I'd point out is, again, referring to your wonderful chart that you share on Twitter, in terms of which positions yield the most, or which teams yield the most tackles to certain positions. The Chargers ranked dead last in terms of tackles yielded to other teams, to other linebackers. So yeah, even though Damone Clark might step into that larger role, I'm keeping my expectations in check for a big week from him this week.
Yeah, that was definitely another reason that kind of pushed him down the ranks a little bit there for me. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it. I mean, another just massive episode here as we preview all these IDPs and all these teams. We only had 2 teams on a bye week this week, Green Bay and Pittsburgh. So it definitely gives us more to talk about. But Jace, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you coming on here, for giving up over 2 hours of your time now to talk IDP with me and drop all this knowledge on the listeners. I really do appreciate it. So thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I'm a talker, so I'm not surprised it's run this long. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun coming on. I said at the start, I love coming on to your shows, John. I always learn something myself. So yeah, it's great to be on talking about my favorite subject with your good self. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure, and I'm happy to have you on. But before you do go, let everybody know where they can find more of you and all of your work this season.
Yeah, if you haven't heard enough of me tonight already, you can find more of me. I've got I host the IDP After Show Rankings episode, which goes out as a podcast and a YouTube show. Every Wednesday night, usually released on a Thursday morning. I'm inviting a different guest on each week to break down the weekly rankings that I put out for the show, and also any rankings that they themselves produce. That's been a kind of a fun ride. I've also got a weekly article over at DLF, Dynasty League Football, where I talk about some of the dynasty roster moves that IDP managers should consider. So trades, adds, drops, starts, who to bench, that sort of thing. And then finally, I've also got my dynasty rankings over at DLF. So the top 150 players and the top 25 rookies too. It's keeping me busy, all this stuff, but I love it, man. As I said to you, John, I'm living and breathing IDP, and it's wouldn't have it any other way.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, glad to hear it. And definitely go check out Jace's excellent work. He puts out some great stuff there. So check him out on Twitter as well, at Jace Abbey. And yeah, that's going to do it for us. Again, for me, you can find the IDP fantasy report for free up on PFF.com right now. It's got all the snap shares, utilization, IDP waiver targets, all from this past week. So check that out. We'll have the IDP rankings up on the site in article form Thursday morning as well. Yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. Everybody tuning in, lending your time. Thank you very much. And we will see you next.